crisis that we have in the world, and how it's something it's such a glaring wound and such an obvious thing to talk about, and I don't know exactly why I keep some days I feel like I should just hone in purely on that and almost talk about nothing else. And but just quickly, I want to remind everybody what I'm doing here. I'm going live for 20 days to practice finding my own flow and finding my own comfort in front of a camera, something I'm really uncomfortable with, actually, and trying to make sure I'm showing up as authentically as possible, because that's the space in which I can be in the most flow. In other words, when I'm not worried about how it sounds or how it might be taken. I mean, you can just give yourself another chance to say something again, right? You can pause, you can stop. And so much content on the internet is exactly the opposite. It's contrived. Hey, James, nice to have you here, mate. And my wife joined today. It's so important to model what normal looks like again, almost, so that when people see it, they can go, oh my God, that's so refreshing. And then remember, oh shit, that's how we're supposed to be speaking to each other. So that's one of the reasons I'm doing this. And also so that I can find the kind of people that are resonant with these sorts of messages, that have the patience. Zach joined as well. That's awesome, man. People that have the patience for slower, more thoughtful messaging, because if we're ever going to take back the internet, it's going to be exactly via this medium, slowing down, finding stillness, finding the deeper depth of connection between people, even through such an electronic medium. And all of this really is to funnel that light that might come through this onto the project that I'm leading with Chetan, called A Better Way, which is a better way to engage on the internet, a better way to engage in politics, a better way to step through how we lead and how we find meaning in work, and how we, Yuri, so glad you could join me today, man, how we explore um, spirituality and mysticism, but in a context that's very grounded and not breathy, and doesn't involve staring into each other's eyes or just trying to sound esoteric and mystical for the sake of it. So no Instagram spirituality, no Instagram philosophy, and just how real can we be with each other. So that's the aim of the A Better Way project. And as I said today, I wanted to talk about masculinity. And there's a piece I wrote on Instagram and on Substack, and I want to read two pieces for you today. So normally I don't do a lot of reading, but as this period is coming up over Easter, let me just frame this quickly. What's happening in the collective conscious, whether it's unconscious to us or not, is these arriving waves, or these membranes, these contractions of birth, of this Kali Yuga moment, this long dark night, the deepest part of the dark night that we're all facing. You can see it coming. You can see the dissolution happening. One term for that is apocalypse. Apocalypse just means the dropping or the removing of the veil, so that what is true and what is real can be pronounced. And another word for pronouncement is doom or judgment, right? So when you see the tarot card and those people all staring up at the angel blaring the trumpet, what you're looking at is the pronouncement of doom, not that there's some God speaking down on top of people, but it's a metaphor for this is the shape of the reality that you helped create, and now this is the pronouncement of doom. This is how the TikTok, the seesaw of karma, of cause and effect, needs to now play out for there to be the necessary correction, for there to be the necessary ending, for there to be a necessary renewal, right? The cycles have to turn. And then right in the middle of all of this, we're experiencing what the Western mindset still lingers onto, which is this idea of Easter, this idea of the Son of Man, some form of redeemer or a scapegoat, depending on how your psychology is wired, that comes along and offers us like this insight and is holding space for that higher thought form, for that higher level of consciousness. And here in this death of Christ that we're looking at symbolically, that's the moment where a lot of people are supposed to step up and hold the vigil and hold the almost like lighting a candle for each of the legs of Dharma that can now no longer stand properly in the world in the Kali Yuga, and hold that space ourselves through the long dark night. So in that context, it becomes I don't know, kind of important to reflect on what we value and all the rest of it. So I'm glad everybody's here joining me, especially that it's over Easter. Now, I wrote two pieces about divine masculinity and the fallacy of divine masculinity and the bullshit that surrounds it. So I'm just going to read, right? Sorry, let me just remind everyone why I was talking about reading is because as my own soul and heart and mind and consciousness is kind of tracking this death period and this vigil, I'm a lot less chatty. I know it doesn't sound like it right now, but this is about as much as I've got. So I've actually decided in my lives to resort to things that I had said more eloquently before. And I think it's topical, yeah? Because when we look at the death of Christ, we're also looking at the death of the solar figure, very specifically the Son, not the Father. And you can think for yourself, you can reflect archetypally what that might mean. And it says it's underneath a quote on Instagram. It says, the key to masculinity is vulnerability. Being allowed to make mistakes because authenticity needs to be practiced. And real leaders don't only choose responsibilities they cannot fail at. And my argument here was we are going about the project of masculinity all wrong. All wrong. The only way we embody anything resembling a divine masculine is by honoring something of a divine feminine, nothing more. And actually, it's time that we begin to shift the focus of our spiritual and healing projects to honoring and embodying the human masculine, with its all too natural animal heritage and integrating that into our actualizing self, our relationships, and our societies. It is time we normalize vulnerability. It's time that we normalize vulnerability and the reality of what it means to have the psyche, the hormones, and the appetites of an animal. Men, if you feel anything like me, are unfortunately stuck with that reality. And it doesn't matter how much spiritual bullshit or political bullshit or idealistic bullshit from men or from women or from society or from pop culture is pushed on me. Anything that doesn't make room for the whole reality and the whole truth inside of me is not something I can digest or swallow or accept about myself. And it's certainly not something I want to model for other men. Hey Jen, nice to have you here. We're talking about masculinity today. It's time we normalize vulnerability and the reality of what it means to have the psyche, the hormones, and the appetites of an animal, crafted by millions of years of evolutionary biology that you do not extinguish and patch over with 2 decades of spiritual idealism or identity politics. If we want to actualize as a species, men need to actualize as men, and women need to actualize as women. And we can't be prescribing for each other exactly what that looks like. We need to be honoring the question and the answers and the journey and the difficulty of discovering that path for each of ourselves. And we need to yield to the truth that men and women contain both masculine and feminine polarities. That's a fact of hermetics. It's not a fact, it's an axiomatic truth of hermetics. If you want men to step up into their rightful place as leaders, as the leaders we want, the husbands, the partners, the fathers we want, that better version of themselves that we all benefit from, if you want that, they have to be allowed to fail and get things wrong. They have to be able to be too angry, too grumpy, emotionally unavailable at times, too emotional in certain ways. They have to be allowed to regulate and find their own middle ground. They have to. And they have to be able to do that in a space that calls out what is rubbing up against us instead of calling out the whole man. And if that's not possible, how does anyone in this society ever collaborate meaningfully? If a man is committed, this is the difference. This is where I want the permission from society to me as a man. I'll show up in my best self, but to do that, I have to be able to make mistakes. I have to be able to get things wrong. I have to be able to lean too far. Authenticity has to be practiced. I didn't get a manual for how to be in this world at this moment in time. And I promise you, all of the reading all the Lao Tzu and all the Art of War and Miyamoto Musashi's Five Rings and Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, and none of that shit gave me the context that I need to apply to navigate my moment in my generational trauma, in my moment in time, in the bullshit that I was facing in corporate reality, and how I tried to find my standing amongst men and women and my family. And this is the thing, right? This is what I expect of human beings, of leaders. If a man is committed to their own growth, if a man is committed to their own growth and evolution, open to feedback, coming from love, not fear, respectful of boundaries and willing to sometimes be wrong. It has to be okay for them to fail. Men and women and society have all played their part in normalizing the ridiculous sets of expectations for men to be strong providers and safe rocks of stillness. Men and women and society have all played their part in normalizing the ridiculous sets of expectations for men to be strong providers, safe rocks of stillness, but not allowed to struggle authentically to find their way there. Authenticity cannot exist without vulnerability. And I go on to say something universal about leadership here, which is the simplest distillation of all the advice I can give to people, because what we're dealing with is a leadership crisis. Our masculinity crisis is actually a leadership crisis, because the examples that we give to young men and to any men who are floundering to find their way and make sense of the current moment is because we have such poor masculine leaders, such poor role models. And it's the same for women. You know, before we go and talk about the war of the sexes, just talk about the self wounds, the own goals that we are inflicting on ourselves. Look at the way Instagram culture glamorizes whoring yourself as a man or a woman, and the way the dating culture has absolutely fucking decimated the sexual identity, the wholesome sexual identity of young men and women, and won't only fuck them up, but will fuck up the children that they will one day have, because this is now the rot and the twisted idea that's now been normalized, right? And so it's the same with women. Whatever correction needs to be made there, it's not something I can preach down, but I can talk about leadership, because leadership is universal, right? And to be a leader, is to understand that doing something imperfectly with the right intent and the willingness to take on feedback and the commitment to improve requires no time to get started. You don't have to wait until tomorrow. You don't have to make resolutions for it. To be a leader is to understand that doing something imperfectly with the right intent and a willingness to take on feedback, you've got to be open to hearing. That doesn't mean you have to accept all the feedback you get, but you've got to be open to it. A willingness to take on feedback and a commitment to improve requires no time to get started and no barriers to starting. It should require no permission and carry no risk of blame if mistakes are made. Actualization is the leadership of self. Mistakes are either learning opportunities or we do not grow past this point. And when I say we do not grow past this point, I mean as individuals and as a society. If we can't start now making room for this reality of vulnerability and authenticity and how we're going to lead ourselves forward and the kind of people that we're going to choose to follow in this, the problem in the world at the moment, if there is such a thing as the simplest distillation, because you can say it's a spiritual problem, you can say it's a leadership problem, you can say it's a alignment problem, you can say it's a bit, but how do human beings make contact with solving that when the problem is so large and I am such a small human being? How do we actually meaningfully step into that breach and start making any kind of difference here in this long, dark night when we're supposed to be holding the vigil for these great ideals, while this symbolic Christ figure, this archetypal example of magnanimity and the best versions of ourselves that we can aspire to, if that symbolically is the moment that thing is dying from the world, and we're supposed to be holding the vigil, what exactly can we pin our intentionality and our efforts on? And the simplest answer here is looking at the wound between the masculine and the feminine, how it arrives here with me. And that could be our relationship as men to daughters and to women and to mothers and to this idea of the mother and the goddess and the earth as a feminine symbol of abundance and grace. And conversely, for women, it's your relationship with men, with brothers, with sons, with fathers, with masculine leaders. And if you look underneath all the layers of confusion, political confusion, ideological confusion, religious confusion, all of that boils down to a mummy issue and a daddy issue. Psychologically, it does. And if you look, take a leaf from Jung's book, our authentic native experience of our inner child, our soft animal, our shadow, all of that psychologically underneath is archetypal. That's the native language. It's a language of archetypes. It's the more than just having a mental cognitive experience, we're also having an experience as a self. There is a self mind called the psyche, and that is the foundational kind of core of what it means to be a self. And that whole self, that experience that that self is having, is is narrative. It's story. It's how we stand in relationship with to power, to forgiveness, to and that then drives forgiveness, shame, blame, power differentials, what it means to belong. And there comes all the morality and the ethics and everything else. Everything else flows from that. Everything else flows from that. So right at the bottom of that, the quickest, most simplest way into something that resembles a solution, a universal solution, is breaching the masculine feminine wound. We are not showing up for each other the way in which a society can cohere. Family, family is one of the most elegant and sublime inventions of nature, the idea of family. And that family is like a little temple, archetypal temple, that relies on two pillars, a masculine pillar and a feminine pillar, that completely appreciate the necessity of the other. And in the Kabbalistic turn of phrase, there's this lovely saying that says, the right impels and the left adducts, not abducts, adducts. So that's like the muscle pairings in our bodies that allow us to lift heavy weights and to do incredible things. It's this combination uh, of tension and integrity operating against each other. It's how plants grow. It's how all movement in the universe happens, actually. It's this concept of balance between these paired dualities. And now we have the opportunity to be conscious in that paired duality as men and women. Remember, masculine and feminine is not tied just to men and just to women. It's something that both have. It's something that both have. You know, I lead psychedelic ceremony, and there's this one track that I play for people. And it's this very masculine, it feels like a pipe cleaner to the masculine soul. It like really gets into the primal root of the man's psyche. You can feel it when that music is on. And then I love to say, especially if there's men in the room, that so often is the case, that are struggling with their concept of masculinity and how to bring that to bear in the present moment, because we're not making a lot of room for that at all. And I want to make it very clear that to be masculine has nothing to do with status or height or muscle mass or wealth or any of that other shit. It's literally the leadership that we show in our space. Yeah. And I love to point out when that song is playing, now just hear me out, how gay masculinity is. It's a very hard concept for people to understand. And I don't mean sexually gay. I mean, there is this side of masculinity where we can only find the right level of reflection about what we appreciate in ourselves and appreciate about masculinity in the company of other men or in the eyes of other men. And there's a camaraderie that we can only find that way. And there's a form of attraction that we have to a certain physique and a certain appearance and a certain energy. And if we're very, 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 very honest with ourselves, the absolute core, like the yin and yang symbol, where the black has got the black teardrop has a white spot and the white teardrop has a black spot in it. The absolute core of masculinity is something feminine. You might not be able to see that, meditate on it, you'll understand it, ask me questions and I'll explain how. The easiest way is actually to listen to that piece of music. And I think when this is finished, if you go to the Substack article that I'll post on my Substack with this 20-day live video for day 7, I'll actually post the link to that. And I defy you to sit and listen to that in a meditative state of mind and listen for what I was talking about. And you'll see that you'll feel this incredibly primal masculine rhythm, like driving the percussion and the movement and everything. But underneath is this kind of sitar twang or string instrument that's being twanged in such a way. And when you hear that and you understand how that is so essentially masculine, and then you realize that the signature of that is actually kind of feminine, it's a wonderful paradox. And it tells you something about men that you probably wouldn't understand no matter how much I talk about it, you know. And I don't know how long I've been rambling for, and I'm very grateful to everyone that's coming here. James, you've written me an essay that I can't read yet, mate. Somebody's written here, with total respect for your spiritual beliefs, I come to the admirable, empowering healing from a different culture, history, a Passover, Pesach, be it a society or an individual. To become the best self requires an unchaining of some constraining situation or relationship. Not always easy, but self-actualizing is the best path forward, and co-encouragement. I don't know exactly what to make of that, but I think what I'm hearing James say is he comes to this idea of Easter, this Western idea of Easter from the Jewish tradition of Pesach, which means Passover. And that's something that happens in the Judaic mythos, where Moses is trying to convince Pharaoh, these are all archetypal characters, to release the chosen people from Egypt, in which they are in bondage, so that they can proceed with the Exodus and go and move towards the promised land. And all of my study of that mythos tells me that it's archetypal, not literal. And what the story is about the unwillingness of our lower nature to release its grip or its bondage over our soul, so that it can continue its upward and onward journey. So it's not lost on me, but thanks for adding that in, mate. If anyone's got any other questions, since you're here, if you want to hit that little love heart button, it'll tell this infernal machine that this is something that humans value watching. If you want to add a comment on here, it'll do the same. And otherwise, just have a beautiful weekend. I'll be back here tomorrow, sometimes rambling to myself into the camera, and it won't necessarily be so dense, but I think I'd like to continue talking about masculinity and the masculine crisis we have. And maybe I can be a bit more, I can add a little bit more, because I spend a bit of time reading. But by the same token, there's something else from Substack that I highly recommend you go read. It's something I wrote earlier, and you'd have to search for it on my Substack. It's called My Father's Son, and it's a poem I wrote about masculinity, and there's a short written piece underneath that which has a very similar argument that makes a couple of different points. And I think it's worth reading now. So thank you very much, everyone. Yeah, I don't have much else to say. This is the awkward part where I never know quite how to end. No, you put down first. No, you. No, you. I never know how to quite end the conversation. But thank you very much for joining me. I hope you have a lovely weekend, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bless you.